Hello again. As you know, I am Eli the Computer Guy, and today's class is users, groups, and permissions in Linux. So today we're going to be talking about how to add users, how to add groups, how to delete users, how to delete groups, how to deal with permissions, passwords, etc. The main thing to understand, as I keep saying in this Linux track, is it is all relatively easy as long as you just kind of focus what's going on. Adding users is easy, adding groups is easy, etc. The one thing that's kind of weird with Linux is Linux has actually kept users, groups, and permissions much more simple than Windows has. Back in the days when I started with Windows, users, groups, and permissions were relatively simple in the Windows world. Since then, now you can give users like 15 or 20 different types of permissions to any particular file folder or organizational unit. In Linux, it's all simple. You have users, you have groups, you have a couple of permissions. That's it. So Linux, users, groups, and permissions is a lot simpler than in the Windows world. You just have to learn a few commands and understand a few things, and you'll be able to set up users, groups, and all that like a snap. So give me a second, and then we're going to dive into users, groups, and permissions in Linux. So managing users in Linux, it is a very simple thing. Like I say, with almost all of Linux, as you understand the commands, it's a very simple thing. So the first thing that you should understand how to do is how to add users. All you do to add a user to a Linux system is you do sudo super user add user or space add user, all one word, and then whatever the username is. So let's say Eli. So you do sudo space add user space and the username, Eli, whatever. When you run this command, it will add the user that you just created, and then it will ask you what you want the password for that user to be. It'll ask you what that person's given name is, Eli Etherton or whatever, and it will ask you some more information to kind of flesh out the profile for that user. But this is all you have to do to add a user in Linux. Sudo space add user space Eli. That's it. Now, in order to delete a user from Linux, all you have to do is you do sudo userdel, D-E-L space, and then whatever the username is. So in this case, it would be Eli. So sudo space userdel space username is what deletes user accounts from the system. So to add is add user, to delete is userdel. Now, as I've talked about before, as I talked about in the Vim class, all the configuration files for Linux are stored in simple text files. So things like user accounts, group accounts, etc. All that information is stored in a text file, and that text file is the /etc/passwd file. So this file right here stores all the information. So it stores the usernames for the users, it stores the home directories for the users, etc. So if you want to see the users that are on your Linux system, or if you want to see what their home directories are, etc., all you do is you do sudo space vim, or whatever text editor you prefer to use, space /etc/passwd, and that will show you all of the information for your users. It'll show you it'll show you the usernames, it'll show you their given names, it'll just show you everything about the user that you need to know. Now, the only last thing that you have to understand with user accounts is how to change a user's password. All you do is the command is sudo passwd, so it's P-A-S-S-W-D, not word, it's P-A-S-S-W-D, space, and then the username, so Eli. So if you want to change a user's password, all you do is sudo space passwd space whatever the username is. It'll bring up a prompt. It'll say, please type in the new password, please type in the new password again. You do that and the person's password is changed. So adding users, deleting users, managing users is really simple in Linux. If you want to add a user, it's add user command. If you want to delete a user, it's userdel command. If you want to change the password for a user, it's passwd command, so passwd. And then again, like I say, all the configuration files in Linux are stored in text files. The text file that contains your user information is in etc/passwd. If you use Vim or whatever your text editor is, you can go in there and, like I say, you can rename user accounts, you can change the given name, you can change their home directories, etc. So let's go over to the terminal and I'll show you how all this works actually within the server. So here we are, we're sitting back at the Ubuntu screen. So the first thing that we are going to do is add a user. So the command is very simple. It's sudo, sudo, space, add user, user, space, and then whatever the username of the person will be. So this is whatever username that they are going to log into the server with. So we'll just do test user. Then we hit enter. So now, it just created the test user, and it's asking what you want this test user's password to be. So we'll just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like before. Retype 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now it's asking you for the full name because, is this Billy Bo Bob? Is this Janie Jane? Who is this person? So we'll say this is a test user. So you can put in something like this, and then you hit enter. You can put room number if you want, phone number. All this information is basically so that when you go into the configuration file, you can determine who this person is. Then is this information correct? You hit yes. And then you're back. So that user has now been created. Now let's imagine that we created the user and then we forgot the password of the user. So we need to change the user's password. Again, all you do is you do sudo, then it's password, but it's passwd. It's passwd, and then the username, test user. Hit enter. What is the new password? 11111. Enter. 11111. Enter. So now there's a new password. It's 5 ones in a row. That's all you have to do to change a password. Now, before we delete this user, I'll show you how you use Vim to go in and you can change things, like I say, like the home directory for the users. So to change a home directory for the users, you would use sudo vim. Sudo Vim. And now again, I keep using Vim for all these classes, but you could use whatever text editor you would want to use. And then you go to etc passwd, passwd. This is the file that contains all the information about your users' accounts. So you hit enter, and then you can come in here and you can see all of the user accounts. Root, daemon, bin, sys. Those are all the normal stuff. Eli, my account that I've always been using, test user, etc. You can see in the blue that it tells you the username, and then if you go over, it shows you the full name of the user. So for Eli, down near the bottom, you'll see it says Eli the Computer Guy. Test user, say this is a test. Then you can go over and you can see where their home directory is. So the test user home directory, you can see it over there in green, is /home/test user. So whenever the test user logs in, that is the directory that they automatically drop into. For Eli, it's /home/Eli. Then you can see different services on the system actually have their own user accounts. So MySQL has a user account. Its home directory is /var/lib/MySQL. So you can get all this information just out of this very simple passwd file. But to get to this, all you do is you do sudo vim space and then etc passwd. Then if you wanted to go in here and you wanted to change something, like for test user, we could come in here and you could just you could insert like you would any other file. So you hit A, and then you can say test user 1. So we can now rename test user to test user 1. We hit escape, then we hit :WQ and enter. And that's it. So we just were able to rename test user to test user 1. It's very simple. Now, so if we want to get rid of test user 1, so we want to delete test user, which was renamed to test user 1, all you do is you use the userdel command. So it's sudo userdel test user 1. Enter. And now test user 1 is gone. If we go back up into use vim etc passwd, you'll go down and you'll see now at the bottom there is no longer test user or test user 1. So that's all you have to do to create user accounts, to change user account passwords, to delete user accounts, and to modify user accounts by going into the etc passwd file using vim. So with that, let's go back out to the real world and we'll talk about groups. So I've shown you how to add users, delete users, change passwords, change the home directory. Like I say, this stuff is really simple. Now the next thing we need to deal with is groups. So if you're new to computers, or just to kind of remind you, the only thing that groups are really used for is they are used to make it easy to either give people access to files and folders or to restrict access from files or folders. Like I say, if you're new to computers, you're used to dealing with 1 people, 5 people, 10 people. Well, in the real computer world, you'll be dealing with 50 people or 1,000 people or 10,000 people. So trying to change permissions for each individual person, not only is it a pain in the butt, but it actually does take a lot of time. Like I know, if you're new, you may be thinking, oh, changing the permissions for a user only takes, 2 minutes. Well, if you've got 1,000 people times 2 minutes, that's a long time. Well, what you can do is you can put users into groups, and then you can give specific groups either rights or restrictions to files and folders, and it makes life a lot easier. Again, in the Linux world, this is all just pretty simple stuff. So if you want to add a group in Linux, all you do is you use the group add command. So you do sudo group add, and then the group name. So let's say you wanted to create the marketing group. You do sudo group add space marketing, and then, as we'll talk about later, you would put all the people in the marketing department into that group. The executive group, sudo group add executive, etc. That's all you have to do to add a group to the system. Sudo space group add group. Very simple. Now, if you want to delete a group, again, very simple. Sudo group del, D-E-L, and then whatever the group name is. So you create the marketing group, sudo group add marketing, you delete the marketing group, sudo group del marketing. The only thing that I'll say is just be careful with deleting groups, because putting groups together can be a real pain in the butt. That actually does take a little bit of time, and putting in sudo group del takes all of about half a second. So if you delete a group and you aren't really thinking about what you're doing, it may take you a long time to try to have to rebuild that group if you delete a group inadvertently. But that's all you do. Group add creates a group, group del deletes a group. So once you've added the group or you delete the group, you have to know how to add or delete users from the group. Now with this, again, very simple. If you want to add a user to a group, you use the add user command. So what you do is you do sudo add user, and then the username, so Eli, and the group name. So let's say CEO. So sudo add user Eli to the CEO group. It is that simple, and that would add whatever user to that group. Now, if you want to remove a user, let's say somebody gets fired or such, all you do is you do sudo, and now it's del user, D-E-L user. Now remember, for users, the command was userdel, so be careful, don't get this confused. For groups, removing a user is del user. For actually removing a user from the system, it's userdel. So just keep that in mind. This can be a little confusing. So removing a user from a group, it's sudo del user, the username, Eli, and then whatever group it is. So CEO. So let's say I get hired for the CEO position, sudo add user, Eli, CEO. Let's say I get fired from the CEO group, sudo del user, Eli, CEO. So this is how you add or remove users from a group. Like I say, very simple. Now finally, again, as I keep saying, Linux stores all of its configuration file and data basically in simple text files. So the text file that stores the group information is the group file in the etc directory. So if you need to take a look at it, or if you want to modify it, you just do sudo, again vim. Vim is the text editor. That's the one that I like. If you have another one, use that. Then all you do is /etc/group. And this will pull up and you will see the configuration file for all the groups. Within this group file, you'll see the group name, and then you'll see all of the group users. So if you're wondering if somebody is in a particular group, like I say, you can just open up this group file, take a look at it, and see who is in what group. You know, is Bob in the marketing group? You can go and go, oh, yep, there's Bob right in the marketing group. So this is the configuration file that stores all the information for the groups. And if you need to find out information about whether a group exists or not quickly, or who is in a group, this is the folder that you would go to. So again, like I say, with all this Linux stuff, it's pretty easy. If you're going to add people to a group, it's group add. If you're going to delete people from a group, if you're going to add a group, it's group add. If you're going to delete a group, it's group del. If you are going to add people to a group, it is add user. If you're going to delete people from a group, it's del user. And then finally, if you need to see all the information for the group, you go to the etc/group file, and this will show you all the configurations. So with that, let's go over to the computer, and I'll open up a little terminal, and I'll show you how all this works. So here we are back at the terminal screen. The first thing that I want to do is I want to open up that group file with Vim that I was talking about to show you how the group configurations are stored on the system. To open up the configuration file, you just do sudo vim, then space /etc/group. So this is the file that contains all the information for the groups. You hit enter, and now these are all the default groups that are in the system. You see root, daemon, sys, add, disk, etc. Now on the left hand side you see the light blue name of the group, so that's the name of the group, and then all the way on the right you see that some of these groups there's Eli beside it. So Eli, that's me, the user account in the system, is already a member of some of these groups. So you can go in here, you can see the group name, and then you can see all the users that are members of the group. So basically, if there are multiple users to a group, you would see the first username, then comma, then the second username, then comma, then third username, etc. So let's get out of this now. Q. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add a group to the system. So we are going to add the test group. So we do sudo space group add space test group. So group add is the command to add a group, and then test group is the name of the group. And then enter. And now the test group has been created for whatever it is you want the group to be created for. Now to add a member to this group, so let's say we're going to add me to the test group, Eli, and we'll do sudo add user, username Eli, to group name, test group. And then you hit enter. So it has added Eli to the test group. It is really very, very simple. Now if we go in, we'll go back and we'll use Vim to take a look at the group file. Do Vim, etc. Now if we scroll all the way down, we will see test group, and then we will see Eli. So we have created the test group, and we have made me a user of the test group. Now, if I want to delete a user from the test group, remember we use the del user command. So it's sudo del user, username, Eli, group name, test. So this is the command that will delete the user from the group. Remember, to delete a user, you say userdel. To delete a group or user from a group, you use del user, and then you hit enter. And now Eli has been removed from the test group. It's that simple. Then, if you're like, screw it, we don't want the group at all, and we want to delete the group, you then just do sudo group del space test group. So it's sudo group del is the command, space, and then whatever group it is that you're trying to get rid of, and then you hit enter. And now test group has been deleted from the system. So we showed you how to create a group. We showed you how to go in using Vim and see all the group settings. We showed you how to add a user to a group. We showed you how to delete a user from a group, and then we showed you how to delete the group entirely. Now, just being part of this class, like I say, I'll just hammer again. Userdel command deletes a user. Del user command deletes a user from a group. If you make a mistake with that, you can just have a really bad day. So with that, let's go back out to the real world and we'll talk about permissions. So users are pretty simple, groups are pretty simple, and permissions are going to be pretty simple. Now, in Linux, you will normally hear of permissions referred to by a 3-digit number. So you'll see 777 or 757 or 700. This 3-digit number basically says what the permissions are for this file. So when you're dealing with a 3-digit number, what you need to know, 77, let's say 777, the first digit is the permission that the owner of the file has. So whoever owns the file has this permission. The second 7 is whatever group owns the file. So you know how I was talking before about groups were important because of permissions? This is why. So members of a group have this second permission. And then the third number here is everybody else in the world. So the first number is the owner of the file or folder. Second number is the group owner of the file or folder. So this means anybody that belongs to the group that owns this file or folder can do whatever they want. And then finally, the last digit states everybody else. So this is internet users. This is just random users. Everybody else. If you're not the owner and you're not in the group that owns the folder, then you're just everybody else, and this is your permission. So what this means is relatively simple. So how you get to these numbers, 777 is the highest level. Basically this means full control, you can do whatever you want. Well, the first way you get to this is the number 4. So if you have a 4, that equals read permission. So basically, if this third number was 4, it means that everybody else in the world has the ability to read the files or folders, but not to do anything else. Next, you have 2, which is write. So this means you can write to the file or folder. And then finally, you have 1, which means execute. Now, execute permission is not normally that important in the Windows world. If you're used to Windows, you've probably seen the execute permission, and it doesn't really matter. Well, the thing is, remember, what are we using Linux for? We are using Linux for servers. Servers are programs, servers have scripts, etc. So many times people don't need to have read permission to something. They don't have to have write permission to something, but they darn well need execute permission to do something. So like if you have a website and it has PHP files, well, PHP files are scripts. In order for those scripts to work, they have to be executed. So if you don't give your everybody else at least a 1, they won't be able to execute the scripts that are on your website, and basically it won't work. So all these numbers do is you decide what level of permission you want to give the owner, the group owner, and then everybody else, and then you just add it up. So you say, I want them to be able to read. So let's say this is a website. So you want people to be able to go to the website and you want to be able to them to look at the website. So you want them to be able to read. You don't want them to be able to write because you don't want them to start like doing graffiti on your website. And you do need them to execute because like I talked about, you know, PHP files and such, they actually have to be run. So what you would do is if this was a web server, that means everybody else would need to have at least the 5 permission. See how that works? So what you could say is I want the owner of this file or folder to have full control. They can read, they can write, they can execute. I want the group members to have full control. They can read, they can write, they can execute. And then I want all the web people, everybody else, I don't want them to be able to write to this file or folder, so I will just give them the read and the execute. That's how these numbers work out, and like I say, they're really pretty simple. So if you're trying to set permissions onto a file or folder, all you have to do is you have to figure out, what permissions you want people to have. Remember, the first number is the owner, the second number is the group owner, and the third number is everybody else. And then 4 is read, 2 is write, 1 is execute. So the command to change the permissions on something is sudo, then it's chmod, change mod, and then space, and then you put the number. What do you want the permissions for this file or folder to be? Let's say 777, right? Then you put the name of the file or folder. And then if it's a folder, what I would suggest you do is you do space -r for recursive. So it changes permissions all the way down. Though you don't necessarily have to do that. So all you need to do to change the permissions for a file or folder is sudo space chmod space that number, whatever you've decided, 777, 757, 755, whatever. It's your security policy. We'll go into classes on security policies later. So whatever security policy you came up is what you put here. Space, and then you put the file or folder name. If you put a file, you don't have to put anything else. If you do a folder and you don't put the recursive, the R, then that will give you only permission to that particular folder. It won't give you permission to the folders underneath. So let's say you have a www folder and then you have a content folder. If you did sudo change mod 777 and you put the folder www, you'd be able to do whatever you want here. But if you went into the content folder, you wouldn't have any rights or permissions. So that can be a bad thing. I would say do the recursive. So sudo change mod 777 space file or folder -recursive R if need be. That really is all there is to it. So with that, let's go over to the terminal and I'll show you how this works. So here we are back at the server. We are in the test directory. So I created a test directory under root, and then I created a test1 directory inside test directory. So we are sitting in the test directory, and we're going to be playing with the test1 directory. So the first thing that we should do is see what the permissions of the files or folders are that are in the current directory. We can do this by using the ls-l command. So ls space -l, we talked about this in the navigation class. This will list all the files or folders in the current directory with a good amount of information with it. So when we do that, we see all the way on the right hand side, test1 and that green box, that is a directory that is sitting in this folder. Then all the way on the left hand side, you'll see that there's D, don't worry about that, but then it says RWX, RWX, RWX. Well, those are the permissions for this folder. So the first 3 RWX means that that's a 7. So the owner of this folder can do anything you want to it. The second RWX is for group. That says the group can do anything it wants to it. And then the third RWX says that everybody else can do whatever they want to test1. So basically the test1 folder is completely open, which is a bad security thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the permissions for test1. All you do is you do sudo space, then you do chmod space, and then what permissions you want to give people. So let's say we want to give 755. So we want the owner of the folder to be able to do whatever it wants. We want the group owner of the folder to be able to read and execute, and we want everyone else in the world to be able to read and execute. So to do that, it would be 755. Basically, all you have to do is you just do the math to figure it out. Then we say the folder name, so test1. And then if we want to do it recursive, we do space -uppercase R. So if we don't put this -uppercase R, it will change the permission just for the folder, not for all the subfolders and files. If you do this -uppercase R, it is called recursive, and that will change for all the files and folders in this directory, and then you hit enter. And it's that easy. So the permissions for test1 directory have been changed. If we do ls space -l,
we can see the changes. So if we look on the left-hand side, the owner has read, write, execute permission. The group owner has read, nothing, execute permission, and then everybody else has read, nothing, execute permission. So that is all you have to do to change permissions on files or folders on the system. Like I say, it's really pretty easy. So let's go back out to the real world and talk about changing ownerships of files and folders.
So we've talked about the users, the groups, and the permissions. So now the question is how do you change the ownership of a file or a folder? So, you know, we talked about a user can own a file or folder and a group can own a file or folder. So how do you change that? Again, it is all very simple. If you want to change the user that owns the file or folder, you do sudo, and then as we talked about in the Vim course, it's CHOWN, change owner. Pretty simple. If this is a folder, then you should put the -R, space -R, and this is for recursive. This means that it'll change the ownership to all subdirectories and everything below the particular file you're dealing with, folder you're dealing with. If you only want to change a permission on that particular folder or that particular file, you don't have to put the recursive there. Then all you do is you put in the user, space, and then the file or folder. So this is all you have to do to change the user owner of the file or folder. Sudo, space, CHOWN, space. Again, if it's a folder and you're giving them permission to the ownership to everything, you do -R. If it's not, leave it out. Then you put the username and then the file or folder that you're giving permission to or giving ownership to. I say, pretty simple. Then, if you're trying to change group permission, again, it's pretty simple. So it's sudo, and then it's CHGRP, change group. If this is a folder, like before, space, -R for recursive, then you put group name, and then you put the file or folder. That's all you do to change the group ownership of that file or folder. Sudo, space, change group, CHGRP, space, uppercase R, space, group name, space, file. And that's all you do. So that is how you change ownership. And again, this is very important, like I say, with Linux, when you're dealing with web servers, because let's face it, most people are using Linux for web servers, a lot of times you need to change ownership so that people internally can manage that web server, but you don't have to worry about people on the outside world, your visitors, being able to hack your system. So being able to change the user owner of a file or folder or the group owner of the file or folder becomes very important. But that's really all there is to it. So let's go over to the terminal and then I'll show you how this works.
So we're still sitting in the test directory that we created before. Now we're going to use that ls space -l command again to list the contents of this directory to show you more information that this command shows you. Now you see the permissions all the way over the left hand side, then you see a number. Well, then right beside that number where it says root, that is the user owner of this folder. And then there's a space and then root again. That is the group owner of this folder. So now if we want to change the user owner of the folder, we just use that CHOWN command. So we do sudo space CHOWN space. And now if this is a folder and we want it to be recursive, -R, then we do the user we want to change it to, so Eli here, and then the folder we want to change, test1. And then all you do is you hit enter. Now if we do ls space -l again, we can see if you look over, Eli is now the user owner of this folder. So I now own this folder. Now if I want to change the group, so you can see Eli is the user owner, but the root group still owns it. Well, let's say I want to change the group ownership to test group. All you do is sudo space CHGRP for change group space -uppercase R, then the group name, so test group that I created before, and then space the folder name, test1. Hit enter. That did it. So ls space -l. And now we can see, if we look across, we see the permissions, then we see Eli is the user owner of this folder or file, and then we see test group is the group owner of this folder or file. And that's all there is to changing the group ownership for files and folders in Linux. So with that, let's go back out to the real world and have some final thoughts.
So that's all there is to users, groups, and permissions in the Linux world. Like I say, if you've been brought up and if you've been trained in the Windows world, do not overthink Linux groups, users, and permissions. Like I say, in the Windows world, it is just ballooned into this weird, monster, hellish whole security thing. In Linux, it's all relatively simple. You have users. You can put users into groups. You only have 3 levels of permission and 3 types of permission. So you can have read, you can have write, and you can have execute, and you can have any combination of those. You can point those, like I say, towards the owner user, towards the group owner, or towards everybody else. And everybody else literally means everybody else. And that's really all there is to it. So you can add users, you can delete users, you can change passwords, add groups, the whole 9 yards. Again, the main thing with Linux, the main thing I'm trying to teach you with all these classes is don't overthink it. Linux is really simple as long as you understand the commands. So this all, like I say, the groups and the users, this will become much more important, especially when we start talking about actually building out servers, web servers, FTP servers, etc. So this was the class on users, groups, and permissions in Linux. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. As you know, I'm Eli the Computer Guy for Everyman IT, and I look forward to seeing you at the next class.